Foremost, I start out by giving all praise and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Kakadash, the bonus of apostles, elders, bishops, a great millstone, rule well, not so tell me this truth. Shalom to you brothers out there pushing the truth for sincerity and use your body as a living sacrifice, as the scriptures say. Shalom to the elect, shalom, shalom, shalom. And we're going to go into the fourth generational warfare, you know, also known as 4GW. The apostle brought this out on the outside, and I decided to, go more in depth into it. Okay, and here's a short video. Let's just play it and see where the spirit takes us.
We have seen that 3 gigawatts or maneuver warfare really started in 1915 and came to maturity in 1940. The previous posts have also shown that major changes in warfare were always preceded by changes in the political, economic, social, and technical segments of society. Given that changes in these areas are apparent precursors to changes in warfare, we have to ask if the changes in society since the evolution of the third generation are sufficient to indicate that it is time for the fourth generation. We know it took about 100 years to move from the height of 1 gigawatt conflict, as represented by the Napoleonic Wars, to 2 gigawatts conflict, as represented.
Right, that 1 gigawatt, which is the first generation of warfare, and the scriptures speak of that, bear with me. Grab it. 1G warfare, right? First generation warfare. Bear with me. Okay. They call this the Napoleon era. Okay. First generation warfare, the most long span of all generations, refers to ancient, post-classical, and early modern battles fought with mass manpower using uh, phalanx, line, pike, and shot and column tactics with uniformed soldiers governed by the state. And they would call that the Napoleonic era, but basically two large armies, which it goes back way further than that. When you have two large, massive armies, that stand each other face to face to do a full on battle. Okay. It says this generation came to an end around the mid 19th century due to rapid improvements in range, accuracy, and rate of fire of many weapon systems, right? Here it is, a British Napoleonic Wars reenactor watching modern military helicopters. That's what it goes into. That's that first gigawatt, you know? So let's see what the scriptures has to say. All right, Isaiah 9:5. Okay, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, right? And that's that loud, yeah, roar, as those armies, collide. You got the yelling, the screaming, the swords clanking, the mace, the horses, the chariots, the archers. All right. For every battle of the warriors with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. And it's telling you here, right here, that the battle is going from the battlefield with man on man combat, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire, the war that's to come, which is going into the 4 gigawatt and the 5 gigawatt, you know, which is the modern day warfare, modern day battlefields. Okay. It's in Jeremiah 50. Is this it? Okay, the Lord, this is Jeremiah 50 and 25. The Lord, Yahweh, Bashem Yahushua, had opened his armory and had brought forth the weapons of his indignation. For this is the work of the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, of hosts, armies, in the land of the Chaldeans, right? And that's the Lord opening up his armory. And what's the Lord's armory? It's the modern day weaponry, you know? Here it is. Created the smith. Isaiah 54 and 16. Bear with me, my internet is running a little slow. Okay. This is Isaiah 54 and 16. Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the fire, that bloweth the coals in the fire, and bringeth forth an instrument for his works. I have created the waster to destroy. And the modern day weaponsmith, blacksmith, the modern day weapons are ICBM missiles, hypersonic missiles, the Patriot missiles, the THAAD missiles, and how those created. It's not created in some tent, and you got the guy with the fire, and he's dipping it in the and he's dipping the metals into the fire and forging a weapon. No, the modern day smith is the scientist, you know. And it says, I have created the waster to destroy. You go back to Oppenheimer, you know, he said, I have become a destroyer of worlds, quoting, what's his name? Is it Bakaragiva or something like that along those lines? Oppenheimer, destroyer word speech, right? He said right here, J. Robert Oppenheimer famously recalled line, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, right? And we just read that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, the Heavenly Father, have created the waster to destroy. Not during a former political speech, but in a 1965 televised documentary about the first nuclear test, you know? So, hey, you can't make this up, man, you know? Let's go back to the video. Salakia.
By World War I. It required that long for society to develop the industrial, societal, and technical base to support the huge armies during a 4-year struggle. We also know that although all the tactical elements of 3 gigawatts war were present in World War I, it required the 21 years between World War I and World War II for society to develop the base required to generate full-fledged maneuver war, 3 gigawatts. Therefore, to explore the possibility that 4 gigawatts is evolving, the logical period to examine for political, economic, social, and technical changes.
And that was the 3 gigawatt with the Oppenheimer, you know. Um, Matter of fact, let's go back. Let's go into that. Third generation warfare. Okay, all right. Let's read. Second generation refers to military revolution and industrial warfare evolving around the inventions of rifled muskets, breech loading weapons, and continuing through the development of machine guns and indirect fire. This generation predates the widespread effective use of motorized vehicles in battle and combined armies. The term second generation warfare was created by the U.S. military in 1989. Okay, third generation focused on using late modern technology driven tactics of leveraging speed, stealth, and surprise to bypass the enemy lines and collapse their forces from the rear. Essentially, this was the end of linear warfare on a tactical level, with units seeking not simply to meet each other face to face, but to outmaneuver each other to gain the greatest advantage. Armored units, military aircraft, and airborne forces began to play an increasingly critical role in operations, which developed with the development of strategies such as blitzkrieg and deep operation. Okay, so now we're going into the fourth generation. Well, we are in the fourth generation, as presented by Land, presented by Land ETAL. Somebody tell me what that means. Is characterized by a postmodern return to decentralized forms of warfare, blurring the lines between war and politics, between combatants and civilians due to states, loss of their near monopoly on combat forces, returning to modes of conflict common in pre modern times, guerrilla groups, private military contractors, and paramilitary organizations play a prominent role in the fourth generation warfare. And that's the warfare that we're in now, that we have been in over the, I would say, since the Iraq war, you know, because they had other groups, proxy, proxy groups, and that's where you get the Taliban, ISIS, and it's all on a political scale. Hezbollah, the war in Syria with US and Russia, you know, and then they blur politics and propaganda, to push those agendas. Okay, so let's read it right here. 4GW stands for fourth generation warfare. It is a military concept describing conflicts that blur the lines between war and politics. Okay, so it says blurred lines, no clear front lines. The distinction between civilian and soldiers disappeared. And that's why you have hospitals being bombed, you know? Hospitals are being bombed, towns are being bombed. What else? Apartment complexes, especially over there in the Middle East and in Ukraine. All right. It says like groups, networks, or insurgents rather than official national armies. Prop- Psychological focus uses media, propaganda, and manipulation to fracture an adversary and an adversary society. And all of that's been going on. How do they do that? They do that through CNN, Fox, you know, inciting the people, creating a boogeyman of some sort. Saying it's for one thing and it's actually another thing. Weaker forces use low cost, unconventional methods to exhaust a technological superior state. Okay? So let's go into this a little more. Um, Elements. Fourth generation warfare is defined as conflicts which involve the following elements: complex and long term. Remember, the war in Afghanistan was a complex war, and it was a long term. I think it was over 20 years. The whole Iraqi-Afghan war, terrorism, tactic, a non-national or transnational base, highly decentralized, a direct attack on the enemy's culture, including genocidal acts against civilians. Did we not see that with Palestine? Those people are still over there starving to death. A direct, okay, all available pressures are used: political, economic, social, and military. They cut the funding off. They didn't allow first aid to come in. They didn't allow the Red Cross to come in. You know, they didn't allow the people to migrate out. Occurs in low intensity conflict involving actors from all networks, and that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing a lot of bad actors, right? They're good at what they're doing, but they're bad actors. You know, non-combatants, because we see through the bullshit. We got the ice out. Non-combat and a lot of the American people see the bullshit too. That's why they're pushing to have the First Amendment done away with, the freedom of speech. You know, they don't want nobody questioning or talking about it. You know, if you're not talking about if you're not talking on the behalf of what suits the government. Lack of hierarchy, small in size, spread out network of communication and financial support. Use of insurgency tactics as subversion, terrorism, and guerrilla tactics, right? So, let me get back to the video.
Is the time between the start of World War II and today. Obviously, a single post cannot begin to provide a definitive list of the enormous societal changes since that time. However, this
Right. It was an enormous societal change since that time. But why? Why is everything moving so quickly? Right? And that's beautiful because I didn't know he was going to say that, but I already had this pulled up. This is Revelation 11:14. The second woe is past, right? It's speaking of the Second World War. And behold, the third woe cometh quickly, right? So, like he just said in this video, you know, it was a quick societal change since the Second World War, right? And we're currently in the 4GW, heading to the 5GW, the 5 gigawatt, the fifth generational warfare, you know, which is autonomous, you know, which involves you seeing it today with the drones, and then in a minute they're gonna have China's creating a sixth generation, fighter jet that doesn't need a human element to operate it. It's gonna be fully autonomous. You know, that's where they're going with the robots. You know, you're gonna have actual machinery on the battlefield, and then you're gonna merge man with machine on the battlefield.
post provides an abbreviated listing of some of the key changes. It is designed to stimulate thought concerning the breadth and types of changes in society since the 1940s, and lead the reader to consider how those changes have affected warfare during the same period. Politically, there have been extensive changes since the end of World War II. The most obvious is the exponential increase in the number of players on the international stage. Prior to the war, the nation-state was the only significant player on the international scene. Immediately after the war, both the political and economic spheres began changing rapidly, and each added numerous and varied players to the political stage. The most obvious change in the political scene was the creation and growth of international organizations. The first was the United Nations. It provided an international forum that had been lacking and was the precursor for numerous other international organizations.
Right, and all of this is key elements to creating that world's government, that one world order. You know, because it's no longer fueled by the actual nation itself, but the entrance of the international community, the entrance of the bankers. You know.
It's called one. While it had little real power, the United Nations was immediately a part of any international political struggle. Initially, one of its prime functions was to provide an appearance of international approval for action taken in defense of both national and international interests, primarily of Western powers. However, as the United Nations expanded to include an ever-increasing number of third world nations, it became an effective place for those nations to express their disapproval of the actions of Western powers, in particular the United States. Further, the United Nations was only the first of a series of international organizations that now have significant impact on the negotiations and relations between nations. The United Nations alone has given birth to the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
There we go, right? See, it's all funded by the bankers, because every war is the bankers' war. They're the ones who profit, you know, from these wars. All right, that's all I needed with that. Okay. Let me go to Jeremiah real quick. Okay, it's Jeremiah 50 and 22. A sound of battle is in the land and of great destruction, right? How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? And Babylon is going to become a desolation among the nations due to the modern warfare, which is the modern day arrow, which are ICBM missiles. You know, the soldiers are not going to use those Napoleonic warfare tactics. That's not going to happen. You know. Oh, I have laid a snare for thee. Thou art also taken, O Babylon. Right. And then Yahweh Shem Yahushua laid a snare for them because they're so spread out in this war right now with Ukraine and Israel that they are literally running out of defense missiles. You know, it takes what, a year to make 12 THAAD missiles. You know, but China is producing 100 missiles a day. You can Google that. So they're literally overwhelming Babylon and its allies. You know, with the technological advances. You know, with the infrastructure and how fast that they can get shit done. You know, O Babylon, thou was not aware. Thou art found and caught because thou hast striven against the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua. The Lord had opened up his armory and had brought forth the weapons of his indignation, for this is the work of the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, of armies in the land of the Chaldeans. And guess what? Daniel 4:17, the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. You know? See, this is all another one, Proverbs 21. The king's mind is in the Lord's hand. He will it wherever so he chooses, right? Come against her from the utmost border, open her storehouses, cast her up as heaps, and destroy her utterly. Let nothing of her be left. See, when those missiles hit over here, they're not gonna have enough missiles to counter that. Enough anti missile defenses to counter that. They're gonna get hit with overwhelming force. Okay? Slay all her bullocks, let them go down to the slaughter. Woe unto them, for their day has come, the time of their visitation. The voice of them that flee and escape out of the land of Babylon to declare in Zion the vengeance. See, this is the vengeance of the Heavenly Father. Because you don't touch the apple of his eye, which is his people. See, and even Thomas Jefferson said he feared for his country and his kinsmen because of the wheel of fortune, that something supernatural is going to happen to take these people out of power. You know, you can go look that quote up as well. The voice of them that flee and escape out of Babylon to declare in Zion the vengeance of the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, our power, the vengeance of his temple. Call together the archers. What's the modern day archer? Is the silos that house those nuclear missiles, you know, those intercontinental ballistic missiles. Call together the archers against Babylon, all ye that bend the bow, kept around it, kept against it round about. Let none of thereof escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she had done, do unto her, for she had been proud. You know, and that's these Edomites. Trump is proud. One day he's up there, he's boasting, oh yeah, we totally obliterated Iran, we had decimated them, they are destroyed, but they're still, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. How can you destroy somebody that's still fighting? You know? And Zelensky told his ass, he said, hey, you got a whole ocean protecting you. You know? But see, now the world has got smaller because of hypersonics. It takes 27 minutes for a hypersonic to be launched from Russia into New York City. You know? And I believe that's the furthest distance that it has to travel, because if it goes the other way, to California, the time might be half the time of that. Okay? You're not getting around prophecy. You people can hate us all you want to, you know, but it is what it is. It's already written. Okay? According to all that she has done, do unto her. Oh, why don't black people just pull themselves up? You know? That's the Edomite conversation. You're trying to get around slavery, and you're not getting around it because the record is in heaven. Okay, for she had been proud against Yahweh by Shem Yahushua, against the Holy One of Israel. Therefore her young men shall fall in the streets, and all of her men of war shall be cut off in that day, said Yahweh by Shem Yahushua. But that's it, man. I don't have no more time left. My break is over with. So with that, I pray you edify until next time. Shalom from Yasha Allah.